So yeah, back to, I suppose, our topic about sustainability. What we do know is that agritourism has an absolutely key role for some in making farms and crofts more viable. It can be about creating employment, not just for family members or for others within our community. It can also facilitate succession by growing the business and by spreading the risk across. So of our 3 businesses that we have speaking today to share a little bit about their own stories and experiences, we're going to kick off first of all with Sally and Shona Duncan, farming out near beautiful Loch Lomond in Drimmen. They're part of the business which is Duncan Family Farms, along with Shona's husband Bruce. I did ask all our speakers today, where was their happy to go-to place? It's not here, definitely not. I thought it was quite interesting and telling. Shona, if she had her dream of being anywhere at the moment, would probably be on the wonderful island of Islay, while Sally, also on an island, but not the same one, over in sunny Tiree. I don't know what that tells you about families working together, that they both need to retreat to an island with some distance and water, but really looking forward to hearing from both of you about your story. So come to the podium. Thank you.
So thank you, Alison, for that wee introduction. And good morning, everyone. We are Shona and Sally Duncan, and we are representing our family business, Duncan Family Farms. We're going to deliver a short presentation on the sustainability of the family farm and croft, and particularly how agritourism has enabled our family business to be more sustainable for the next generation.
And if you haven't worked it out, I'm the mother and Sally's the daughter. And like Alison said, this is way outside our comfort zone, so please bear with us. So I'm Shona Duncan, and I'm the imposter in the family, and I only became a Duncan when I married my husband Bruce after meeting him in agriculture, which we studied in Edinburgh. Bruce and I farm alongside his mum and dad, Ian and Tricia, who are on the right in the photograph, and also Ian's cousin John and his wife Jane, who are on the left. Ian and John's fathers were first-generation farmers and started the farming business when they bought Inveruglas Farm and the hefted sheep stock from Luss Estates way back in the 1950s. Bruce and I have 4 grown-up children, pictured at the back, and they all love the farm life, and 3 of whom are showing a keen interest in joining the family businesses. We currently don't employ anyone else other than the family members in the partnerships. And with Ian and John closer to 80 years old than 70, we're definitely going to benefit from having the next generation in the businesses. And I don't want to be farming still when I'm 80, and I'm planning my retirement already. So we now run 2 separate farming businesses in a stratified and sometimes complicated farming system, which now involves 3 different farms, one of which is 33 miles away from the other 2.
Inveruglas is where our family's farming journey began, and it operates as its own business. It's a hill farm at the north end of Loch Lomond, 10 minutes north of Tarbet, within Argyll and Bute. Inveruglas covers about 4,000 acres of rough hill ground. It's mainly rock and it's pretty mountainous, covering 3 Munros, Ben Vane, Ben Vorlich, and our sheep also graze part of Ben Eames. Across that ground we have a herd of 30 shorthorn cross suckler cows and around 1,500 black-faced sheep. Those flock numbers are very much so an estimate, as we're never 100% sure where they all are or whether we've got them all. It really is a very extensive way of farming and not always the most profitable.
So the second business is run at Lansdrum Head and Blair Fad, which is where Bruce and I and his folks stay. And they're both near the village of Drimmen, on the boundary of the Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park. Here we run about 1,100 breeding ewes and 180 native bred suckler cows over about 1,300 acres, 1,000 of which is owned and the rest is rented on a mix of tenancies. Primarily, we're beef and sheep farmers and we have no arable ground. The only crop we grow is silage for our own cattle, and much of our grassland is permanent grass or rough grazing. All of our breeding ewes are descended maintenance of our flock at Inveruglas, as we buy in the cast ewes from Inveruglas and they come down to us for a year or two for a much easier life. Inveruglas can be quite an inhospitable place in the winter. Our cows at Lands of Drumhead and Blair Fad also originate from the herd in Inveruglas, which at one point was a pure Highland herd. So they're mostly hardy, hairy types.
So now on to what we're all here for, and that is agritourism. Our agritourism story started in 2019. We always thought we had the potential to diversify the farm, but just didn't seem to have the time. Mum's main role in the farms is the sheep enterprises, whilst Dad focuses on the cattle. But with myself and some of my siblings looking at coming home to work, agritourism started to become a more realistic possibility for us. We'd looked at glamping pods for about 3 years on the trot at the Highlands show and never actually did anything about it. And I think it was when Mum heard the leader funding scheme was coming to an end that she finally got the kick up the backside that she needed to do something about it. So we applied for the leader funding and planning permission for 4 glamping pods on what we thought was the perfect spot overlooking the West Highland Way. We were successful with our leader funding application, but unfortunately our National Park Planning Officer did not think it was such a perfect spot, and our planning permission was refused. So we appealed, which we were told could be a lengthy process, and we were also told we were unlikely to be successful. So in order not to miss out on our funding, we applied for the same project on another area of ground, which was not in the park, but with Stirling Council instead. By this time, it was early 2020, and we had hit COVID. And although our planning permission with Stirling Council had been accepted, due to COVID, our leader funding deadline had actually been extended. So we decided to hold out and wait to hear the verdict on our original planning application in the park, which was our preferred site. Finally, in late 2020, we were informed that our appeal had been successful, and all 5 on the board unanimously agreed it was the perfect spot for 4 glamping pods after all.
So our glamping pods are bespoke luxury glamping pods, and they each sleep up to 4 people. They're fully heated and kitted out with a small kitchenette and ensuite shower room, with a large deck at the front of each to take in the surrounding panoramic views. Since we're avid sheep farmers, we'd always fancied the idea of our glamping pods resembling shepherd's huts. And we persuaded our pod builders to alter their usual design to clad them with corrugated iron and Scottish larch, and we called them the Heft and the Hersel. We also decided that we didn't want to cramp the fairly small area that we'd allocated for our pod project and opted for just 2 pods instead of the originally planned 4. After our problems with planning, we didn't actually order our pods till December 2020, and they finally arrived in June 2021. And the arrival, I think there is a picture on there, the arrival, I think we'd made a nice new gateway and found that we actually couldn't get them in. So I think the top left picture is Bruce actually cutting the top off his new straining post, which he did not enjoy doing at all. And by September 2021, they were in situ and open for business. And as you can see, I think the top in the middle is the family the day the pods arrived on site, and we did as much of the work as we could ourselves. We discovered, or we've since discovered, that pods with hot tubs that are dog friendly seem to be one of the most common searches online. So since we opened, we now allow dogs to stay in the Hersel, something we said we would never do, but we had so many inquiries that we felt we were missing out on what is actually quite a large part of the market. We also currently don't have hot tubs, but after much deliberation between outdoor baths, hot tubs, or possibly, currently more importantly, how to heat them, we've just ordered a hot tub for 1 pod, which we hope will be ready for its first hot tubbers in early spring 2023.
So during the madness of the pods, we also decided to renovate part of the steading up at Inveruglas. We saw an opportunity based on the farm's location. Every year there are thousands of people walking up Benvane and Benvorlich and directly past the yard gate to access them. The steading is also on the banks of Loch Lomond, so we thought this was a great place for people who enjoy the outdoors to come and stay. So from summer 2020 to the end of summer 2021, we renovated Stable Cottage, and it has since been open for just over a year. It's a one up, one down, with a kitchen living area, an up downstairs and an ensuite bedroom upstairs. Up at Inveruglas, we've also just refurbished a 5-bedroom cottage, and it's a great property for a family or a group of friends who are wanting a base to explore the national park. A potential agritourism venture up at Inveruglas is Corrygrogan, which is a old traditional button bend style cottage which never had electricity or running water until this year. Corrygrogan dates back to the 1600s and historically housed one of the shepherds and their family. It's located up a hill track beside the sheep handling pens and really is quite as remote as you can get. We are currently in the midst, though, of trying to decide what it is going to be, whether it's going to be a base for 4x4 farm tours or another self-catering holiday let, or whether we have enough on our plate and can just use the electricity to be able to use a kettle to make a cup of tea at shearing time.
So when we first imagined our agritourism development, we always had the romantic notion to sell our own produce direct to our guests and visitors. It was at this point that we started to think how we were going to brand our business, and after much talking, thinking and charts, we came up with the brand name of Duncan Family Farms, as it seemed to be the only name that encapsulated 3 farms, 2 businesses and 1 family. And so we launched Duncan Family Farms on social media. Straight away, we had a huge following, which started mostly as friends, but has grown to include all sorts of people that are interested in what we are doing on a day-to-day basis on the farm. While our agritourism development was stalled in the summer of 2019 due to planning issues, we set about testing the water, selling our own lamb, hogget and mutton locally via our new social media presence. So we booked in some of our first finished lambs that summer, in with John Scott Meats in Paisley, which is just a 40-minute drive away, where they were processed, butchered, vacuum packed and delivered back to Drimmen. The response to our first meat boxes exceeded all expectations, including the hogget and mutton, and straight away we had to get more booked in. At the same time, Neighbour Food, a weekly online farmers market, was starting up in the area, so we looked into supplying that through that avenue too, and we started selling with them in September that year. That then led on to selling via the Great British Food Hub, which is a similar sort of online weekly market. So now what we don't sell direct from the farm fresh, we freeze and list online, and the rest all goes from there weekly at local drop-off points. When we hit COVID in early 2020, our meat sales went through the roof and we struggled to keep up with demand. Things did ease slightly, but in the first year alone, we sold nearly 100 butchered sheep direct from the farm. So there is definitely a market out there for your produce, and if you can tell your farm story in a way that appeals to the public, they just love to be able to come on farm and buy direct from source.
So why agritourism? There are a variety of reasons why we introduced agritourism on our farms, and the main backbone behind them all is the uncertainty of finances in the future. We were in the very fortunate position that we didn't need to diversify for the business to survive as it was. There was enough income for a reasonably comfortable lifestyle, and it is very much so a lifestyle. With Brexit, there was a threat to change in subsidies from the EU, and as far as I'm aware, we're yet to see significant implications of that just now. But that's not to say there won't be changes in the future. And there's also the bigger picture, and that's the future of farming in general. I don't think there are many people here today that can actually confidently say what the future of farming will be and where the industry is heading. But with this uncertainty, we felt it was a great time to invest in what was going to be another income source for both farming businesses and future generations. So the next generation. I am one of 4 children. I have 2 older sisters, Jan, who's studying to be a biology teacher, Rebecca, who's on the far right there, and I have a younger brother, Gregor. I studied rural business management at SRUC in Edinburgh, and I graduated this year, and I'm now working at home, focusing on the agritourism ventures. Rebecca studied agriculture in Edinburgh, and she graduated last year, and is also now working and living at home. Rebecca's main interests are the sheep, but she's doing more and more with the cattle. Gregor is currently studying agriculture at Edinburgh. You can see there's a bit of a theme here. And as far as we're aware, he's planning on coming home Its main interests are the cattle and, of course, tractors. Now, some people may think 3 farms and 3 children that are interested, that's easy. Just split them up like that. But it's far more complicated and in a bit more of a pickle than that, which leads me on to succession. Succession is a subject which we have been discussing around our kitchen table fairly regularly for the last few years, which can only be a good thing. But right now, it's a major talking point for us looking at the business going forward. But agritourism has definitely enabled me to have a responsibility within the business, out with physically farming, and hopefully it is allowing us all to be able to have a better income to live off in the future.
So our tips and advice, do your research, financial and marketing. Is there a gap in the market and can you provide that unique experience? Do your figures. How long before you've recouped your investment? Find out what funding is available. For us, leader funding made a huge difference and helped with setup costs. We also sourced funding via Forth Valley Food and Drink for commercial freezers for our meat as part of a COVID recovery fund, and also installed a 6 kilowatt solar PV system, which was also funded via Forth Valley Food and Drink by what they called a Climate Nudge Fund. We've also had funding for website and e-commerce set up. If you're involved in a family business, it's never too early to start succession planning. We had a great session with Shan Bushell, who we met via Scottish Agritourism, and we do now have a plan going forward. Trying to make sure everyone in the family business has their own role, although we do all help out when and where required. We are still very much a team. If there's another agritourism monitor farm project, do get involved. For us, being involved has helped us guide us through the whole process from the very start. And finally, don't give up. It's not always the easiest journey, but with the right planning and passion, you will get there in the end. So thanks for listening. We hope you've enjoyed hearing our story and that you haven't all fallen asleep already. And we look forward to taking any questions at the end of the session.
Amazing, amazing. What a good job. I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Like when you say, I mean, obviously Scottish Agritourism and its inception as a member organisation hasn't been around that long. The Agritourism Monitor Farm was running a bit before that. And I still remember that first meeting and you guys turning up and like you were still at that planning, like where can we put it, what can we do? And when you actually then turn around and it's on the ground and you've got your hot tub and you'll be sitting in it, I'm sure, testing it out when it arrives come spring. That is what's really exciting about, I think, the sector we're in, is you just see stuff happen on the ground and it feels like it's a big climb, but then when you're there, it's awesome what you've achieved. And it's probably worth mentioning you guys are now continuing your development journey as a monitor farm in your own right, moving forward, not on the agritourism side, more on the livestock side. So I'm looking forward to that meeting next week. You'll get very used to speaking in front of people. Right, next up, his legs twitching, is our own Balfour Stewart from the bus stop. Now Balfour's happy place, how he likes to relax, is actually, he's a great salesman for his own spot. He loves nothing better than sitting in a hot tub with a glass of wine, picturing the Lammermuirs, which is where his spot in East Lothian looks onto. So Balfour, just, you know, deep breath, imagine the hills, get a glass in hand and pretend that you're really hot in your trunks. But come on up and tell us a little bit about your own journey.
Good morning all, and hi, as Alison said, I am Balfour. And with Elaine, Sandy and Shona, we are the bus stop, unique accommodation in East Lothian. Do you know that the last time I ever stood on a stage was in the early 80s, that's 1980s. And East Lothian were in the final of the Cabaret Challenge competition, East Area. We actually won it for the second year running. And there was some silly guy at one stage stood right in the middle here and sang If I Were a Rich Man. And I can assure you, no, I'm not doing it. No, I might do it with lots of red wine later on, but not just now. So this is where we're based, and it's at the foot of the Lammermuirs, We're 2 miles from the village of Gifford, and we're 6 miles from the market town of Haddington. And there's also quite a big city about 18 miles away from us where you can never get parked. But I was actually born in the old farmhouse looking out in this view, and I've never moved and I never will. It's just a small arable farm. It's only 200 acres, but in my dad's day it was the dairy farm. So I actually have 2 succession stories to tell you. So my dad left school at 16 and he got on a job near North Berwick. It was a dairy farm, and they also rented our small farm here for £350 a year. You know, that's a big rent. But then in the 40s, they moved my dad to this farm to be manager of it. And he moved in with his mum at the age of 22. So no training in agriculture at all. He's just there, 22-year-old, and he's managing this farm. And in the later year, in about 1950, this North Berwick farm bought our farm for £8,400 from the Marquis of Tidal. And as time passed by, my dad bought into the farm and owned half of it. Now, there's no paperwork for this whatsoever. I have no idea how that ever happened. But in those days, you know, a Saturday night in the pub, you know, do you want a deal? Aye. There. So that's all I can actually think, that's how it happened. I wish I did know, but I never will. So I went to boarding school, and my dad didn't actually pay for it. My uncle paid for it. And then I went to college as well. And when I came home, my dad wasn't in good health. And by the time I was 27, he had passed away. And it was a typical sort of smoker's death in those days, because blood could not get to where it should be. So as succession went, it wasn't particularly good because we had no plans together. We hadn't chatted. We had no forward thinking. There was no word of his past. He had never mentioned it. And he didn't even ever speak to me about his father. So in actual fact, I was on my own, so just got on with it. So I bought out the other half of the farm from the North Berwick people, and on I went. The dairy was gone by then. That's the only thing my dad and I did together. We put the dairy away, and it was one of these old-fashioned byres, and we went to the cows and milked them, and we mucked them out, and there was shit everywhere, and there was wheelbarrows, and it just wasn't quite as pleasant as I actually pictured it. So I had moved on. And in those days, there was the wheat era. This is the 80s. And people were growing wheat. And there was the 10-ton per hectare group. And there was the 10-ton per hectare competitions. And we even went to 10-ton per hectare finals in London to compete against everybody. Because this is the era of the world record. The world record was 16 tons to the hectare in Fife by the Gordon Rennie or something. We were all trying to reach for the sky and try and get this thing. So that was what I did for my life. I shared machinery, I helped neighbours, and I rented acres wherever I could. But I still only had a one-income farm, which is fine, you know, and time passes by. Kids grow up. My daughter showed no interest in the farm, and I basically encouraged my son really to go his own path because we were still just one income, and he was happy to do this. Compared to my CV, his is pretty impressive. You see, my CV is a diploma in agriculture, and I can basically steer anything, you know, steering wheel. His is pretty good though, you know. So he went to university, got a degree. They rejected him from the police force, which was, he didn't particularly, he didn't like that at all. So then he got accepted by Sandhurst instead, after a very, very strenuous physical. So he passed out, he joined the Royal Scots, a few trips abroad, and then a tour to Afghanistan. and a commendation for bringing his whole troop home. Very impressive. I actually got the phone call. I was the only person that could ever phone when he's in Afghanistan, and they phoned me one night. And it's a Brit, you know, you get pretty worried. The phone rings, and they said, Mr. Stewart, this is the army or something. And just to say that everything's okay, but you're going to hear on the news today that someone was killed today, and they won't actually give the name, but it's not your son. So I went, oh, thank goodness gracious. But it just shows you how serious it was out there when one of his friends got shot by the friendly Afghan people. Anyway, he survived and he got his commendation when he came home. And after another couple of years in the army, they were trying to tie him down too much. He's a bit of a free spirit. He likes to get out and be outside. He doesn't want an office job. So he became an estate manager. And that was just 2.5 miles away from. It's still in the Lammermuirs. He's getting very close to home. And this is when a conversation arose one day, and he says, do you know, if we could find another source of income, I could come home and we could farm together, and I could help you and make it easier for you and everything. So I thought, all right, okay, well, that sounds a good idea. Yeah, so what are we going to do then, eh? But we actually stored buses, and we had them in one of our sheds, and it was for a renovation club. So these lovely people with anoraks on spent all their money and their time, and they made these buses really pretty. And I thought, this is great. They went away at the weekends, they came home, and they had a rosette. And that was the end. You know, they spent all this money and they got a rosette. And so we basically said, no, I think we can do better. So we actually said to them, you get us a bus and we'll try something different. So this is how we do it. So we drag a bus home from a scrapyard, and then we set up a base. We do a base ourselves. You do some concrete bits so as the bus can sit on them. You've got to jack them up. You don't want a bus sitting on its wheels. Get diggers like that. We've moved all the soil. We always wanted a bit of privacy for each bus, so we did 3 sides of soil buns, and we became very good at that. We like moving soil, actually. We plant trees. We're good at that too now. Lots of bushes, and we were off. Planning, yeah, planning is very tricky. We're in East Lothian. That's really tricky. But anyway, we hired a planning consultant, and we got Savills involved as well. Hi, Debbie, where are you? You're here. Yeah, Debbie's here. And we progressed. So this is how you start. You basically gut the bus. You strip it down and leave nothing in it. The old guy was really good at this, actually. He ended up at A&E after about day 1 with stitches in his hand, and he got banned from doing things like that. No, he's not very good at things like that. Luckily, I had a son-in-law had arrived over the horizon, and it was one of these phone calls, you know, from my daughter, and she went, Dad? I went, oh no, here it comes. She said, if we came home from Bristol and you set Jason up in his first business and give him a shed and everything, we could all be together and we'd be close. And I went, oh aye, I've heard of this before. So we did set him up, but that's quite expensive, isn't it? You know, setting people up in business. So it became payback time. And I said to him, right, how about converting a bus for me? Or 2, or maybe 3. He's very talented, and he is a perfectionist. So here he is. This is his first bus. So we've got a log fire, we've got a rain shower, got king bed with a skylight above it. We've got heating from our biomass. We've got electricity, of course. We've got a decking outside with a wood-fired hot tub. This bus sleeps 2 2 adults and there's 2 bunk beds. So we call it 2+2. So we quickly did another bus. We thought, well, we'll have to have something else. So we did bus 2, which sleeps 2. And then, of course, we thought, what happens if there's people with a family of 5 or something? Okay, right, so we better do another bus. So we did bus 3, and it sleeps 6. And all these 3 buses are classified as our luxury buses. And they were all operational by 2019. So we've got 2 incomes, and we've got 2 steady ones. We've still got 500 acres to farm. We just fit that in on quiet days. My succession was progressing, and it was sort of time to move sideways a little bit. And there was no I-bean for us. So there is a speech by a young lady in the audience to the Oxford Farming Conference in 2014. No I-bean. You're not allowed to do that. So I knew it was my time to move sideways. And so what you do is you have 2 credit cards. You both have a credit card. And we had lots of chats. We had lots of discussions. And then we start changing things, or he does. So we change our accounting system, which is excellent, you know. So we move to 0, and he does it all from now. Great. Less work for me. We change our accountants. Good too. We do our own bookings now and so on. So there's no way I was going to do bookings, you know, it was too much computer work and stuff like that. So I just leave it to him as well. So we change, and we change. This is just a tip for the younger generation, you know, when you've got the old guy on the farm, buy him Bose headphones. And get them to download lots of music and podcasts and stuff like that, and just leave them alone. Make sure he's got a big piece. Now, most of you know what a piece is. It's a packed lunch. But make sure he's got a big one, and he's as happy as Larry. The big one in the middle is a 3-piece day. So a breakfast piece, lunch piece, and tea piece. And actually, you need a really big piece bag as well then. So our succession's continuing, and the young is doing more and more and more, and the old is just doing slightly less. So we have obviously a touchy subject, and it's called my will. So the will is done, it's agreed upon. We all sat down, we discussed it. And everyone said, okay. I explained how it should go. My daughters agreed. Son agreed, and we got on with it. And I signed it. You might just sign it, by the way. If you don't sign it occasionally, you have a problem. And then we did power of attorney as well. So that's what I meant to do as well. So that's done. So I'm doing well. And then the young come forward with another idea. She said, what about a glamping site? Which I've never heard of. What's glamping? But anyway, they knew glamorous camping. So okay, we'll have 6 more buses. Let's go. So these don't have power though. They do have a log fire inside, and they've got their log fired hot tub as well. And the little shed at the side, it's a New Zealand expression, is a long drop. And that was just as far as the digger arm could go. So there's actually quite a big hole there. It's good. But these are real bus experiences. Our luxury buses, you know, once you're in them, they aren't actually a bus, but these are still buses. You know, they've still got the original seats. They've got handles, a driver's seat driving, steering wheel, controls. It's actually a young child's dream. You see all the children just sitting there. And actually the fathers as well. Quite often you see the fathers just sitting on the seat. And we also build a communal toilet shower block and a communal kitchen bus, and he's called Bob. And Bob has his own electricity, so there's solar panels putting power into batteries, and we've got a backup generator as well. So in the middle of 2019, we've now got 9 buses. We've got lots of business. We've never actually advertised, ever. But Savills had put out a lot of press releases, and because we were so unique, the press actually took it up, and our Facebook page went viral. And this was actually our field of dreams. Build it, and they will come. So in the last 2 years, we have averaged 750 changeovers a year. And that's 750 hot tubs we have to clean. But we're getting really good at that. We've got about 3,000 visitors coming and experiencing the local area. And we always ask them, or if they ask us, we say, well, the local village, if you could go there, that's great, it's lovely. And then if you want to move on, you go to Harrington. And then if you want to move on, go to the coast. And
that's amazing. Thank you very much, Val.
I'm nearly finished. Did the sign come?
All right, yes, it did.
Oh, it did, right. I just would like to finish with one final thing. Okay? Not that one. Not that one. And this is just our eco site. And it basically is, just to show you, it's an oversight. Thank you.
Thank you, Balfour. That was amazing. I asked all the speakers today if they had a superpower, what would it be? And Balfour just kind of went, I don't need a superpower because I'm super pops to all the grandkids. And I have to say, I think you'd be an amazing grandfather, like the creativity and the imagination in those buses in your site. It is just extraordinary. Our final speaker for this session also has a superpower. If she could have anything in her world, it would be the power to fly. So Lindsay Robertson is our destination leader for the Highlands. She is, however, based out on South Uist with her business Long Island Retreats that she has with her partner Donald John. And I think we've all met Lindsay at moments where she's had to leave 2 days before everyone else, so she's not going to get home for another 3 days because of the ferries. And it is just the reality, I suppose, of living on the islands. But can't wait to hear a bit more about your own story about making your own croft sustainable in that far-flung place. And I wish you could fly. It would make life a lot easier, wouldn't it? Come on up.
Thanks, Alison. I'd like to start today by saying it's a real pleasure to be here surrounded by so many other businesses that we've looked up to and also learned so much from in our agritourism journey to date. We probably differ quite significantly from the Duncan and Balfour families as we're a crofting enterprise. So we're working on much smaller units and livestock numbers, as well as being at an early stage in our agritourism journey. So what is our story? DJ, Sunday name Donald John, is a 6th generation crofter born and bred on South Uist, and I'm the 6th generation farmer from Speyside, slowly adapting to crofting ways. Together we run the family crofts on South Uist, which have been handed down 3 generations. There's 65 hectares in total, but we have access to a further 613 hectares of Macher common grazings and 1,600 hectares of hill common. Those of you that aren't familiar with the crofting system, the common grazings come with a sooming, which is a limit on the number of animals each shareholder can graze. So we run a herd of 20 breeding Aberdeen Angus cattle, a flock of 100 North Country Cheviot Cross Texels, and this year we reintroduced Highland cattle back out onto the hill ground at Loch Skippert for the first time in about 20 years. They now run alongside our herd of 50 Shetland ponies. So historically, crofts were set up to provide enough land to feed a family. They certainly weren't created to provide a living for one person, let alone two. So the challenge for us was set from the outset. I moved across to the islands full-time 3 years ago, and DJ took redundancy from the oil and gas industry in 2020. Our aim was to create a sustainable future for the crofts and a business that meant we could both do what we loved without having to go back to the mainland for work. The business is driven first and foremost by our passion for the land and the livestock. In 2020, as lockdown was at its height and we had no visitors at all, like many, we appreciated just how special our lives and the place that we lived in was. I started to join the Monitor farm meetings, and with my background in tourism and marketing, I started to shape up some plans for our own agritourism business, whilst also cooking a wee lockdown baby. So post Cara's arrival in 2021, we jumped straight into the Scottish Agritourism members. We were inspired by the members to dream that little bit bigger. In late 2021, when I was going through the Rural Leadership Programme, we approached Highlands and Islands Enterprise and Business Gateway for some support. And you know when a funder's first words are, "I've been waiting for somebody to do this," that you're on to a bit of a winner. So we set out very quickly, pulling together our plans for an ambitious croft diversification that allowed people not only to stay on the crofts, but to enjoy our croft produce and also learn about the crofting heritage and culture that was so important to us. And like many in the room, we're not alone in saying that creating a future for the next generation is also one of the key drivers in our plans. So this little face here is Cara. She's 1.5 years old. She lives for the outdoors and the animals. So if we can create a future where she has a choice in whether she wants to be part of the crofts and stay on island, then we've achieved part of what we set out to do. A big part of our journey was deciding in terms of where to base our business. We have crofts on both the west side and the east side of the island. However, one overriding factor on the west side, where we have those picture-perfect beaches, is that our landlord is also the MOD and we have a live missile firing range. Not many of you will be able to claim that accolade. So the east it was, and this is Loch Skippert. It's where we call home, and it's where we have our crofts on the east side of the island. The views that you see look out across the sky, and on a clear day you can see as far north as the hills on Harris. It's got fabulous historic links. It's where Bonnie Prince Charlie hid out before he escaped to Skye. It was also the first commercial seaport into South Uist. Another huge plus for us is that it's where our Shetland pony herd was based. That was started by DJ's mum in the 1970s. They are already a huge attraction to people visiting the islands, huge social media exposure, but there was a real opportunity for us to build on that and formalise an experience, and also capitalising on the footfall already in place. We're also potentially quite unique in the position that we have direct access to 2 tourism markets, as we're accessible by both road and water, and there's popular anchorage points for sailing boats and small cruise ships just off our crofts, with a slipway that's accessible to the bottom. So where did we start out? The core objective of all the croft experiences is to help preserve and showcase our crofting heritage and culture through authentic island experiences. It was always going to start with the ponies. Who doesn't love a fluffy, cuddly foal to come and say hello to? But this then expanded by being inspired by agritourism members into croft tours, to macher tours, to shearing experiences, and even island tours. What we want to achieve through these tours are allowing visitors to really be able to immerse themselves into the island way of life. where they can learn about crofting heritage and culture, where they can listen to stories about the unique ecosystems that we have, where they can get up close to the livestock, learn about the native breeds, learn a few words of Gaelic, and then come back, taste the croft produce, and meet some of the local crofting characters for some crack. Above all, what we want is people to return home with memories of a lifetime and stories to tell. So I really do hope that this is the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. This is where we started in developing our infrastructure. We had no infrastructure at Loch Skipper. So to date, we've been successful in securing just under £80,000 in capital investment for this base. It's a steel portal frame shed that we put up with the view that you see out Loch Skipper from the end door. It looks out across to Skye. We also put in a road and hard stand-in, which gives us 5 unserviced camper van pitches to try and address a need locally where the infrastructure is lacking in peak tourism season. The location and size of the shed has been chosen really deliberately as it gives us scope to expand going forwards. The larder offering was born out of, first and foremost, our passion for the produce that we raise on island being reared as naturally as you can get and therefore of the highest quality, but also out of our own frustration that we couldn't buy any locally produced meat on island. We used to sell all our lambs in calves store, and then on joining Scottish Agritourism, we were inspired to look more closely at producing our own meat products. A phone call to Alison at Old Leckie, going through exactly all the details that we needed to know in meat production, meant we jumped in feet first and retained all our lambs last year, promoting our own lamb boxes through social media to an island market, and we sold out within 2 hours. This year, we raised our prices further, one post on Facebook, and we sold out within 48 hours. And we have a waiting list for our next batch, with interest also from hotels, shops and catering outlets to work with us. We've retained 5 bullocks from last year and this year from our Aberdeen Angus herd to produce for beef, and we've also introduced pigs back onto the croft at Loch Skipper to produce pork. One of the challenges within crofting, which you may not find within farming, is always access to sufficient grazing because you're working with much smaller marginal units. We're lucky that we have access to good macher grazing, and we also have islands where we graze the sheep in the summer. All our stock are grass-fed and our strapline is matured slowly the island way. This certainly rings true in all our finishing timelines, but it's also something that we need to take into consideration when we're looking at margins. That said, there's still a really good profit to be made and huge demand for local high-quality produce. To date, we've focused on working with a very local supply chain with island abattoirs, keeping food miles as low as possible. And we also work buying our stock out of the croft at the same price that we would get at the mart. Lamb boxes are then sold per kilo rather than an average, meaning that after costs, we're taking between £90 and £150 lamb in profit straight back into the larder. So you'll see our luxury off-grid retreats aren't quite finished. What I wanted to touch on here was that our focus has very much been about retaining the old and breathing back life into the old ruins that we have within the crofts to create off-grid accommodation. It's very much about looking at the assets that we have and making the most out of those. Another point that I wanted to touch on was that I think, to be fair, you can say that by the nature of crofting, working with marginal ground and smaller units, you also always need to look at a slightly different approach in creating a sustainable and profitable business. If I take our approach to the flock as an example, you can see how we've taken one asset and built in many opportunities to create income. Meat boxes are the obvious starting point for anyone starting to look at diversification. But we then looked at what were the byproducts of this. And skins are one thing that many people put into an abattoir and never see again. We've chosen to get those back and go through the tanning process so that we can sell sheepskins directly in a shop to visitors that are visiting the crofts. There is the opportunity to sell into tanneries for £25 a skin. So again, if you're not already doing it, it's something to start to think about. Wool is obviously another product that's very topical, and I don't have to say much more about that in terms of the value that you're getting for it by selling it as a byproduct. For us, the aim is to produce our own products going forwards from the flock's fleeces. So we've reintroduced a black cheviot tup to the flock to produce natural coloured fibres, with the aim of, in the future, you would step into the accommodation and we would have our own sheepskins, the throws and the cushions, etc. would be made from the fibres from the flock. So it's taken a bit of the outside inside. We then looked at what annual events are taking place that we can both educate and create an experience from. So shearing is something that happens every year throughout July with us. So this year we added shearing experiences to the range of tours on offer, and it generates an income for something that we are already doing anyway. Next year we will also be introducing lambing experiences and sheepdog demonstrations, so really trying to maximise the pound that can be made for everything that we're doing already. So I wanted to touch on celebrating success, not to blow our own trumpet, but to say just how much you can achieve when your business is in its early stages or not actually finished and you don't have it all singing, all dancing. We launched this year despite our base looking like a building site and the full product offering not being live alongside a baby in the mix. We've taken time to reflect on the successes that we've had despite the challenges. So we had amazing reviews and feedback from those who visited, confirming what special offering we had, and also how much people want that local contact with your farm or your croft to immerse themselves in your life. We had lots of interest from UK and international travel trade, giving us confidence in the future developments we had planned. And I had to say, if Caroline hadn't said, "You're doing this," I would have never looked at travel trade this year. So sometimes it is being a step ahead of the game because they are booking years in advance. We've got a waiting list for local produce from the larder, and we also have so many other opportunities on the table that it supports our expansion plans going forwards, and it's a really exciting opportunity for us to do more with. And we received coverage from UK and international bloggers and journalists by working really closely with Visit Scotland and Visit Our Hebrides, and we were successful in securing partnerships with Calmac Ferries, sponsoring and hosting social influencers. We also developed amazing working relationships with social influencers like the Hebridean baker. He has an international audience of nearly 500,000 followers, and a chance Instagram comment saying, "Are you coming to South Uist for a book signing?" and a follow-up email led to us not only creating a friendship with him, but lots of future potential that we can work with him on. So what I wanted to say is, never be scared to reach out and ask for support or partnerships with anyone, no matter how they are. If we'd thought from the outset that all the people that have worked with us this year would have said yes, we would have approached it very differently. The worst anyone will ever say to you is no or not at the moment. So I don't think Caroline would have asked me here if she didn't expect a little bit of realism too. The last thing that I wanted to touch on really is learnings to date. So funding, whilst essential for large capital developments that we are all looking to do, can place huge extra pressures on you in terms of finances if the drawdown is just at the end and you're having to put out all that money in advance. So careful planning is key, and also in delivering projects within tight funding timescales. Timelines are always got that leeway in them, but we learnt this year, potentially to our own detriment, how much other people would impact our timelines. The other thing that we learnt is very much that customers who either come to you for tours or are just visiting the area that you are in want to be able to buy from you. There is a huge opportunity to upsell your own produce, whether that be wool, skins, meats, even if it's just images of your farm and what you are doing. So for us, we're creating a small shop area to be live for the 2023 season. We also need to, as a sector, champion, educate and drive premium prices in the market for our produce. It's been quite enlightening in our own area, seeing others that are selling locally being so surprised at what we're charging and the local uptake being so high despite higher prices when they're potentially selling at half that price. So we joined Scottish Agritourism with no product available to market. And one of the things that I always like to reiterate here is that we're very different from others. Most join when you've already got a product. I can't recommend enough the value of the support that we got from people like Alison in taking our product to that next level at an early stage. We could never recoup that advice in a monetary value, but our membership has been recouped 10 times over. The learning basically from us to date is be prepared to adapt and flex. So the last thing that I wanted to say is I hope it's given you an insight into our journey in trying to create a sustainable future. We are a small unit and hopefully it demonstrates to you the potential that is out there. In making your own units sustainable and also creating a legacy for future generations. We are most definitely still on a journey. We're by no means at the finished product yet. So if you would like to join us on the journey and follow our story any further, you can do so at any of the links above.
Amazing. It's a little bit to be inspired on, isn't there, in those 3 stories? Thank you so much for sharing your journeys and your own experiences of your businesses with us all. I think, yeah, wherever we are and what we do, it's always nice to see inside someone else's business, hear a little bit about your own journey, and I think a lot of really useful stuff in there, right down to those, like, you know, your learning tips and your things where there's been frustrations as well. So thank you so much for sharing. We have about sort of 10 minutes. Caroline was a bit late getting off the stage. I'm just pointing that out. Buy myself a couple of minutes. She is like the sheepdog, sort of out on a gather, nipping at the heels to get off. We have a couple of Slido questions, and we'll pop the first one up. Just really quick, just a couple of things I suppose that came out of that, and then we'll move on to some questions. Yeah, it was interesting, Balfour, you talking about your own experience of then your father dying without a will there. Just out of interest, who has a current will? A current will. If you don't have, you can pop your hands up. We've got a couple there. And by current, I mean a will that actually does what you want it to do rather than one that you did 20 years ago and have forgotten about. Okay. We had a few hands of maybe people not on. It's quite interesting there, isn't it? Yeah. That's potentially 40% of people that if you got hit by that tractor outside just now could be interesting times. So don't go too close to it. Don't let it move. Our second question, just out of interest to give a bit of feeling, is who has a succession plan in place? Now, whether that's about you and your own business or whether that's about your parents or perhaps your grandparents, who has a succession plan in place? Yeah, again, a bit of a mix, isn't it? Always really worthwhile, I think, absorbing some of those lessons and tips from the guys and in chatting around. I understand that is sometimes easier said than done, but the beautiful thing about the membership that we do have is there is somebody else who may also be beating their head against a wall, or may have had to come at something a slightly different approach to try and get traction, or just what you can learn about how to progress some of that discussion in a way that is very respectful of everybody involved. So we'll move on to some questions and answers. I'm hoping from the floor, somebody might have a question. It can be addressed to one of our speakers in particular. It can just be a general question and we'll field it out. Does anybody? All right, I will start then. Within the strategic priorities of our growth strategy, one of the things that we absolutely set out that we say we want to do is to, I suppose, create memorable experience for people and to be market-led in the way that we do that. You know, we can all have great ideas, but sometimes it's about adjusting when you hear that. Shona, you talked about I think kind of making an adjustment to some of the things. What have you changed about your businesses, guys, on the back of hearing what your customers have had to say about what you're doing. Anyone got any good examples of where you've listened to your customer base and made a change? Shona?
Well, I think we mentioned it in our talk about adding hot tubs and accepting dogs. That's probably been our main changes, yes. And when we started out, we thought we were going to be West Highland Way walkers and one-night stays, because we're right on the West Highland Way with our pods. And in actual fact, we quite quickly realised that we didn't want to be doing one-night stays and changeovers every day. So we've changed there.
So you've changed on that as well. And change was quite a theme for you, Balfour, as well, wasn't it? You talked about continual change and change. Anything that you adapted in your glorious buses because of customers saying?
Not particularly. I think we're just very lucky when we started. We set it up quite well. We're very lucky that we did wood-fired hot tubs, because if we had had 9 running off our electricity at the present day prices, we might not have been very chuffed, but instead we just chop 125 tons of logs a year. Yeah,
that'll keep you warm. It's a lot of wood. Any questions out on the floor then? Oh, we've got, is that Frida at the back with your hand up? We send a mic up to you. And a couple over there. Okay.
Thank you. One of the things that's always occurred to me when you have, what was your statistics, Shona? 3 farms,
two 3 farms, 2 businesses, but 1 family.
That's right. But when you have a number of children and there's that dilution, inevitably, eventually, the margins have to grow, don't they, to make sure everybody has a fair income. And as the family grows legs, you've already got 2 sets of grandparents, or an uncle and aunt and a grandparent in there. And how do you grow the business to be big enough, to cope with the interest that you've got, very fortunately, from your 3 children?
Well, we're quite fortunate in that Bruce's father has already made the decision that the farm, Bruce has got 2 sisters, that they're not going to be involved in the farming part of the business, and fortunately he has other assets. Bruce's uncle has 3 children and none of them are interested, so that's what we're currently trying to do, is work out a get out strategy for Uncle John. We don't want to give up any part of the farm, but looking like a house might have to go up, so that we can keep farming. But that's our plan, because it doesn't look like any of them are going to be involved either.
Had a couple of questions over on this side. There's 2 hands there. We'll take the gentleman and then we'll come up to the lady behind.
Thank you. Shona, it's a question about planning in the national park, and it was one really interesting point that you mentioned there, running 2 sort of plans at the same time. What was the park's response when were they forthcoming in explaining in great detail why it suddenly was a good idea after you did it another way? Or?
I think we were just unfortunate with the planning officer that we had. I don't think she had anything specifically against us, but she came up with a number of points that it wasn't in keeping with the sort of agricultural background. There was no other modern artefacture in the area, although there was a ruddy big pylon just to the back of the pods. So there was all sorts of things, and one of the things that we failed to understand why it was a problem was that it was visible from the West Highland Way. Well, at that point, we were looking to have West Highland Way walkers staying in them, and we wanted it to be visible from the West Highland Way. But the board, it met through COVID. They came out and looked at the site, all 5 of them, and they're quite a diverse range of people are on the board, and so we were amazed to get a unanimous decision. I just don't understand what the problem was.
Yeah. I think planning's one of those ones that comes up all the time in the member discussions, doesn't it? And it's great to leave it in that experience from different folks. And I think one of the things when we get out into the breakout sessions later, one of the things we are trying to highlight that we can then take back in terms of our lobbying role of what we do as a membership organisation is feed up things that need to go up where there are patterns and real issues or challenges out there. We've got a lady just behind. Hi there.
Hi, my name's Lynn. I'm just curious as to whether or not organic principles and practices or regenerative principles or practices in your farming businesses have mattered either for you as businesses or from a customer perspective that's maybe been brought to your attention.
Great, we'll maybe pass that. Lindsay, are you happy to take that one?
Yep. So for us, we are not organic, but we're probably as close as we could get to it. For example, it's seaweed that we use as a fertiliser, etc. So visitors are really interested in it, but it's not something that we want to go down the route of because we're telling the crofting story and that is a part of it. So people are definitely interested in it, but I don't think you need the stamp. It's what we would have found.
Okay. Do you want to add anything there, Sally, with the meter?
We're similar up at Inveruglas. It's that extensive that we are pretty much as close to being organic without being organic as we're going to get. But down with us at Lansdowne Head and Blair Fad, I don't think we can operate on the scale that we are and being organic.
And just out of interest, do you feel that for your customers that are, how is their importance, their value about being local over being organic more? Or do you get questions about whether you could be organic? What kind of feedback do you get?
I think the biggest thing is that it's local, grass-fed, and they know that it's had a good life. It's probably their key points of what they're looking for. I mean, we're always looking, say, regenerative agriculture. We don't plough, we're mainly grassland, as I said, and we're looking at ways of improving the soil health. We're constantly looking at ways of lowering our carbon footprint, as I think all farmers are, because it's directly linked to costs.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, thank you. We've probably got time for one more question. Kay up there.
Can you hear me?
Or we've got Fiona as well. Okay, we'll take Kay and then Fiona.
Well, it's more of a statement, not a question. I know we've been having a few issues with people logging on and with the Wi-Fi, so I've been out and spoken to the staff just now. So if you're still not logged on, you can log on with PTCH staff, and the password is all lowercase and it is I work here. So hopefully you can log on and you can join in. So I apologise for any inconvenience at the moment about that.
Great, I think we'll take the last question. I think that's Fiona. Hello, Fiona, how are you?
Hi there, thank you so much. That was really fantastic. I was just wondering what gives you the confidence to keep going, to keep investing, developing, coming up with creative ideas and seeing them through. I can imagine there must have been some very scary moments around the kitchen table, sitting as families thinking, oh my God, what have we done? Or, and I'm just wondering what that's like and what advice you would give to others who are thinking about doing, something different and moving forward.
Pit in the stomach stuff. Where do you get your confidence from? Balfour?
It's just something we all have to do, that this is no rehearsal. So you've got one chance. You're going to have to try and reach for it, and that's what we've done. We wanted to do something different. I wanted to, be moved to the side and allow succession, so we had to spend money to do it. So it's now on his shoulders. It's not on mine anymore.
Very well put. I really liked, I suppose in wrapping up the session, Lindsay, you had a great phrase in there about what being part of Scottish Agritourism had done for you, and you said it just helped us dream a little bit bigger. And I just think the stories we've heard this morning, it's all really inspiring, and I think that aspiration and that push and that kind of supportive network that lets you understand that actually, dreams can become reality and they can just be that little bit bigger. So if I could get you all to show your appreciation for our speakers this morning, that would be great.